There is this incredibly universal, incredibly frustrating experience that I think almost everyone listening to this right now has gone through at least once.
Oh, for sure. It's almost unavoidable.
Right. It's that moment where you have studied a topic endlessly. You've read the books, you've taken all the notes, you've memorized the rules.
You feel like an absolute expert.
Exactly. But only in the safety of your own bedroom. And then the universe kind of taps you on the shoulder and asks you to actually do the thing in real life.
And that's when the panic sets in.
Yeah, you just freeze. Your brain completely empties out.
It is a uniquely humbling experience, honestly. Psychologists actually call this the illusion of competence.
The illusion of competence. I like that.
Yeah, it's when you mistake your ability to recognize information on a page for the ability to, generate that information from scratch out in the real world.
Because you have all the theory, but absolutely zero practical execution.
Precisely. I mean, it happens in sports. It happens when you're trying to learn to code. But it perhaps happens most dramatically when we are trying to learn a new language.
Oh, 100%.
The gap between knowing grammatical rules and actually opening your mouth to speak is just enormous.
Which is exactly why we're here today.
Yeah.
When you freeze up like that, you're experiencing the exact chasm we are diving into.
It's a fascinating problem to pull apart.
It really is. So we're looking at a case study from an excerpt called Mastering the Art of Natural Daily English Conversation.
Which originates from the Easy English podcast, right?
Yes, exactly. And we're going to use the journey of an English language learner, a woman named Emma, as our primary lens today.
She's a great example for this.
But really, the mission for this deep dive is exploring the mechanics of moving from passive studying to active, messy, real-world execution.
And it is going to be messy.
Always. Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we look at Emma's situation, it is just so relatable. On paper, I mean, she's doing everything right.
Oh, in an academic setting, Emma is probably a star pupil.
Right.
She's been learning English for a long time. She understands a lot of what she hears. She's a phenomenal reader, and she's built up this vast, impressive reservoir of vocabulary.
Not to mention the grammar rules. She has put in the hours.
She really has. She has all the data.
But then we zoom out from her quiet study desk, and we place her in the chaotic real world. And this is where she hits an absolute brick wall.
The real world doesn't care about your flashcards, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't. And the case study pinpoints 3 very specific, very everyday roadblocks she faces.
Let's look at those.
First, she's at a cafe and just wants to order a simple coffee. But she hesitates, and the moment just passes.
Classic freezing up.
Yeah. Then she's at work and wants to ask a really basic question about a project, but she stays quiet.
Which is so frustrating when you know the answer is right there.
And finally, she's around her coworkers. She wants to join their casual conversation, but she literally doesn't know how to start. She just remains silent.
And that silence, it isn't peaceful. It's incredibly heavy. Her internal monologue is kind of the crux of this entire phenomenon.
What is she thinking in those moments?
She thinks to herself, I know English, but I don't know how to use it in real life.
Wow. Yeah, that hits hard. It actually makes me think of an analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's exactly like spending 6 months memorizing the engineering manual of a bicycle.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Like, you know precisely how the gear ratios work. You understand the physics of the rubber hitting the road. You could probably pass a written exam on the mechanics of the pedals. But the very first time you actually sit on the seat and try to pedal, you immediately fall over.
Because reading about balance is fundamentally different from the physical act of balancing. That is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
It's totally different muscles.
Literally and figuratively. The difference between academic knowledge and practical application comes down to cognitive load. And really, how our memory systems work.
Cognitive load. So what's actually happening in Emma's brain at that cafe?
Well, it isn't a lack of knowledge. It's an absolute overload of it. When she approaches the barista, she isn't just trying to say coffee.
What's she doing?
Her brain is rapidly pulling up thousands of vocabulary words, sorting through complex verb tenses, and trying to consciously construct the absolute, perfect, grammatically flawless sentence.
So she's essentially doing advanced calculus in her head just to get a cappuccino.
Precisely. And human working memory is like a very small whiteboard.
Okay.
You can only hold a few items on it at a time. If Emma's whiteboard is completely filled with grammar rules and vocabulary options,
there's no room left for anything else.
Exactly. There's no room to process the environment, the barista's facial expressions, or her own social anxiety.
Right, because language in a real-time social setting moves way too fast for that kind of conscious, deliberate calculation.
This is textbook analysis paralysis. The complexity of the rules she memorized leads to nervousness.
And that nervousness shrinks the whiteboard even further.
Yes. Which leads to overthinking. And overthinking inevitably leads to hesitation and silence. The brain just crashes like an overloaded computer.
So for you listening right now, I want you to think about a time you felt exactly like Emma.
We've all been there.
We have. Maybe it wasn't a language. Maybe it was a complex software program you took a certification course on, or a musical instrument you learned from YouTube tutorials.
You're completely equipped with the theory.
But the moment you had an audience, or the moment the stakes were real, you were paralyzed by the practice. It's a terrible feeling.
It really is. But this is where the dynamic shifts in our case study.
Yes, Emma recognizes that she's stuck in this academic trap. So she seeks out a colleague named Jake, who seems to effortlessly navigate the exact situations that paralyze her.
Jake is fascinating because he represents the exact opposite of Emma's approach.
How so?
He speaks English easily, but his sentences are notably simple. They aren't overly complex, yet they sound entirely natural.
Right, and when Emma asks him for his secret to doing this, his advice sounds almost frustratingly obvious at first glance.
He tells her daily English is not about difficult words, it's about simple phrases.
Simple phrases.
Yeah, and then he gives her a very specific blueprint of foundational examples. He tells her to rely on things like, "Hi, how are you? How was your day? Can you help me with this?"
And also, "I'd like to order, and I think this is a good idea."
Those 5 phrases might look incredibly basic, maybe even a little boring, but functionally, they are brilliant.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If I am Emma, right, and I have spent years meticulously studying complex sentence structures, advanced vocabulary, and, the finer points of the past perfect continuous tense,
Right.
isn't relying on these super basic phrases a massive step backward? Like, it feels like dumbing it down?
I can see why it feels that way.
If she has studied advanced grammar, shouldn't she be forcing herself to use it? Otherwise, what was the point of all that studying?
What's fascinating here is that we have a cultural tendency to equate complexity with competence, especially when we're learning something new.
We think if it's not hard, it's not good.
Exactly. But Jake isn't dumbing it down. He's prioritizing utility over complexity. He understands that in daily life, communication rarely requires poetry.
So what does it require?
It relies on predictable patterns.
Predictable patterns. Okay, let's dig into that. How does relying on a pattern solve Emma's cafe problem?
Well, think about your own native language. When you go to a coffee shop, you aren't inventing a brand new, beautifully complex, never-before-heard sentence every time you order.
That's true. I just say the same thing every morning.
Right, you're deploying a prepackaged phrase. "I'll have a large drip coffee, please."
I definitely don't think about the subject-verb agreement of that sentence.
Because it's a single, unbroken unit of meaning in your brain. By telling Emma to master these simple phrases, Jake is telling her to build a library of prepackaged units.
Ah, I get it.
He's essentially saying, stop trying to build a custom car from scratch every time you go to the store. Just take the bus.
Just take the bus. That completely reframes the goal. You don't need to invent language from scratch in everyday situations. You just need to deploy the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And this goes right back to the cognitive load we discussed.
The tiny whiteboard.
Yes. When you use a simple prepackaged phrase, you clear off that mental whiteboard. You remove the burden of translating complex grammar on the spot.
And when you free up that mental energy, what happens?
You can finally focus on what actually matters, human connection. You can look the barista in the eye, you can smile, you can read their body language.
Because that is what makes a conversation natural, not the complexity of the vocabulary.
Precisely. Jake's philosophy seamlessly shifts Emma's entire objective. She goes from trying to speak perfectly in a grand academic way to just aiming to speak in small moments every day.
But, knowing that she needs to use simple phrases is one thing. Actually rewiring her brain to do it is another.
It's a huge transition.
Right. If you've spent years being a perfectionist, how do you physically bridge that gap?
Well, Jake doesn't just leave her with a motivational quote. He gives her a highly specific, 3-pronged practice strategy.
And this is where we really see the transition from passive studying to active doing.
It's a deliberate, step-by-step, physical and mental rewiring. And it begins with a critical behavioral shift.
That evening, Emma decides to start. And she specifically stops scrolling on her phone.
A miracle in itself.
Right. She reclaims her attention and opens the first resource Jake suggested, which is a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners from the Teach Yourself series.
And what she does with this book is the crucial differentiator.
She doesn't just read it silently on the couch, she reads the short stories out loud.
Reading out loud is the essential first step in breaking the illusion of competence.
Why is that so important?
When you read silently, your brain remains in the realm of abstract theory. Your eyes scan the words and your brain says, yes, I understand this.
But you're not actually doing anything.
Exactly. But the moment you force yourself to speak those words out loud, you are bridging the gap between the mind and the physical body.
You're actually engaging your muscle.
Your motor cortex, specifically.
Yeah.
You are literally training the muscles of your mouth, your tongue, and your vocal cords to physically produce unfamiliar sounds.
So it's a completely different neurological process.
Completely. And you're also forcing your auditory system to hear your own voice speaking the language.
Which gives you immediate real-time feedback. It turns a passive mental exercise into an active physical drill.
Exactly. Now, after that, she progresses to the second step of the strategy.
Right. She picks up another resource. Learn English through stories, 16 stories, to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
With this one, she isn't just reading out loud. She reads, and then she repeats the sentences.
And through this repetition, she starts noticing patterns, common phrases, and useful expressions.
This is where we see the transition from basic physical practice to deep cognitive pattern recognition. Cognitive scientists call this chunking.
Chunking. I like that word.
By repeating the sentences over and over, she isn't analyzing the grammar word by word anymore. She's internalizing blocks of meaning.
She's noticing how those simple phrases Jack mentioned, like, can you help me with this, are constructed and deployed in various contexts.
She is stocking her mental library with those prepackaged phrases so she doesn't have to build them from scratch later.
Which means she's moving the knowledge from declarative memory, which is knowing that a rule exists, into procedural memory.
Yes, which is knowing how to execute a skill automatically.
Which sets her up perfectly for the final and I think most fascinating step of Jake's roadmap.
The third resource.
Yeah. A few days later, she moves to a third resource. Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native.
And Jake's specific instruction for how to use this resource is where the magic really happens.
He tells her to listen and repeat, but he adds a vital, counterintuitive caveat. Don't think too much.
Which is so hard to do.
Seriously. Emma takes this audio, puts her headphones on, and listens and repeats while she's out walking alone.
Don't think too much. It feels like the ultimate antidote to her cafe paralysis.
But I want to dig into the mechanics of this. Why is this specific progression so incredibly effective?
You mean the reading out loud, then repeating for patterns, then walking and not thinking?
Yes. It reminds me heavily of athletic drills. Like, first, you learn the raw mechanics of a baseball swing in slow motion, breaking down every wrist movement.
Right, isolating the mechanics.
Then you take a batting practice in a cage over and over to recognize the pattern of the pitch.
Building the pattern recognition.
And finally, you just get into a real game and swing. You trust that muscle memory will take over so you don't even have to consciously think about your elbows or your grip.
That is exactly what is happening cognitively, and the athletic analogy is spot on.
Really?
Yeah, this methodology systematically dismantles the hesitation Emma felt at the very beginning by changing where her brain is processing the language.
Oh, that makes sense.
Step 1, built the mechanical comfort in her mouth. Step 2, built the structural library of chunks.
And step 3?
Step 3, listening and repeating while walking and not thinking builds the instinct.
Why does the walking matter, though?
Because walking is a mild physical distraction. By telling her to do this while walking, Jake is intentionally giving her prefrontal cortex, the conscious, analytical, overthinking part of her brain, something else to monitor.
It keeps the overanalyzer busy.
Yes. This allows the deeper parts of the brain, like the basal ganglia, which handle automatic habits and procedural memory, to take over the language processing.
So she is literally occupying her body so her analytical brain stops getting in its own way.
Exactly. Slowly, the dynamic shifts. English begins to feel less like an academic subject she is studying, and more like an instinctive action she is performing.
She has successfully transitioned from memorizing the rules of the bicycle to actually pedaling it.
But of course, muscle memory and procedural habits are useless if you only ever practice them in an empty stadium or on a lonely walk.
Right. Eventually, Emma had to take this new instinct back into the very environments that paralyzed her in the first place.
The true test.
Which brings us to the real-world application. Emma makes her return to the cafe and to her office, and the contrast is profound.
It's a complete behavioral shift. At the cafe, where she previously locked up trying to formulate the perfect sentence, she now approaches the barista and simply says, "I'd like a coffee, please."
And she does this without hesitation.
None.
She didn't overcomplicate it. She didn't try to impress the barista with her mastery of advanced vocabulary.
She deployed a simple prepackaged phrase.
And it worked. She got her coffee.
Then she goes to work.
Right. Before, she stayed quiet instead of asking a project question. Now she walks up to a colleague, her voice calm and natural, and asks, "Can you help me with this?"
A huge leap for her.
And with her coworkers in the break room, where she previously had no idea how to initiate interaction, she just smiles and uses the most basic tool in the kit. "How was your day?"
And a conversation naturally unfolds.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. What is crucial to point out here is that the narrative doesn't pretend she suddenly became a flawless orator.
No, not at all. It explicitly notes that at first her sentences are short, and they are sometimes not perfect.
She still makes mistakes.
But the absolute key difference is she keeps going.
Yes, she allows herself to be imperfect. She accepts the messiness. And over time, the messiness refines itself.
Practice makes progress.
Weeks pass. Emma continues practicing this exact way every day. Small conversations, simple phrases, real situations.
And then she notices something surprising.
She realizes she's speaking faster, her confidence is much stronger, and most importantly, she is speaking without thinking too much.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the ultimate lesson of Emma's journey. Real progress happens in real conversations, not in textbooks.
Perfection is the absolute enemy of progress.
It really is. When Emma was aiming for perfect, complex grammar, she stayed silent. She essentially removed herself from the playing field.
But when she embraced short, simple, and sometimes imperfect sentences, she got in the game.
Because the goal isn't a flawless performance.
The goal is participation.
Exactly. Because language, at its core, is a tool for connection. If you wait until you can use the tool flawlessly before you ever pick it up, you will never connect with anyone.
You have to be willing to use the tool clumsily at first.
The clumsiness isn't a sign of failure. It's a mandatory phase of mastery.
So for you listening, let's bring this right back to your own life and your own goals.
Think about what you're trying to achieve right now.
Whether you're learning a new language like Emma, or you're trying to pick up a coding skill, or you're trying to get better at public speaking.
Or even just trying to become a more active listener in your relationships.
Do not wait for perfect conditions to start participating. You cannot study your way out of the awkward beginner phase. You just have to wade through it.
The transition from a passive learner to an active participant requires you to abandon the safety of the instruction manual.
You have to be willing to fall off the bicycle a few times in public.
That is where the actual learning happens. The friction of the real world is what shapes your fragile theoretical knowledge into durable practical skill.
So to summarize what we've pulled from this case study today, daily conversational success, and really success in executing any learned skill, is about utilizing simple tools in real situations.
It's about starting small.
It's about physically practicing those small things every single day to build procedural memory.
And above all, it is about completely letting go of the anxiety of making mistakes.
It is about valuing the connection over the correction. Emma's journey illustrates that studying gets you to the starting line, but only simple, imperfect action gets you down the track.
It's such a powerful reframe. You don't need to be brilliant every time you open your mouth. You just need to be clear and present.
Because waiting for perfect keeps you entirely silent, while embracing the simple and messy leads to genuine, natural fluency over time.
Absolutely.
Which leaves us with a lingering question for you to mull over. We've seen how over-studying the theory kept Emma frozen at the cafe, trapped by the illusion of competence.
Where else in your life is that happening?
Exactly. Where else in your life are you currently over-studying the theory, memorizing every single page of the instruction manual, when what you really need to do is step out, make a few messy mistakes, and just start pedaling the bicycle?